Alright, you need to pause right now and set up your notes. For Cornell Notes, you have a vertical line and a horizontal line so that you can separate out your notes and record these. So pause until you have that set up. We're starting off here with B2A, Biology TEK B2A. When we talk about Biology TEK B2A, it says that you need to know the definition of science, if I can spell that, definition of science, and understand that it has limitations. You need a notebook for this class, whether it's remote or in person, and that spiral needs to have about 100 pages in it. Preferably it's college rule, but it doesn't have to be. It just depends on how big you write. So we have a couple of words that we need to talk about with this. So first thing we need is a definition for science. And science is the use of evidence to construct testable explanations. And not only explanations, but also predictions. So science is the use of evidence to construct testable explanation and predictions, and it's also the knowledge that is generated by this. So it's also a body of knowledge. The next thing, and I'm going to swap colors, and if you have some different colors to use, it's best if you can take your notes like this. Not that you have to have all sorts of colors, but 2 or 3 colors and you can kind of swap out. Because it's easier on the eye if you can, when you go back to study these, to look at these things. The next thing we know, as per the TEK that we're looking at, is that science is limited. And specifically what it's limited to is our 5 senses. And you can take a minute and see if you can come up with the 5 senses. And the tools we use to enhance our 5 senses. So our 5 senses, see, hear, taste, touch, smell, those are those 5 senses. And when we talk about science, it has to be limited to those things. And because it's limited to those things, there are many things that are outside the realm of science. Many things that you know exist, but they can't be studied by science. Now, my paper is graph paper. That's just because that's the notebook that I had for this. You don't have to use graph paper. It's just not necessary. You can use regular lined paper. But it just happens that that's what I had here. So many things are outside the realm of science. And that doesn't mean they don't exist. It means that science can't be used to study them. So let me give you an example. Your mom loves you. So if we have that in a science room, we say, well, how much does her love weigh? What's the mass of her love? Or what's the volume? Or how much energy? How many kilojoules of energy? And if you realize, we can't even begin to talk about like that. We can't put your mom's love into a cup and figure out what volume it is. Love is something that science cannot deal with. It doesn't mean that love doesn't exist. It means that science can't be used to study that. So when we talk about science being limited, and it's limited to your senses, it doesn't mean that these things don't exist. It means that science can't be used to study it. So again, in a biology class, it causes some problems because we study the theory of evolution, and immediately you get a lot of people that say, "Oh my gosh, the theory of evolution says God doesn't exist," and no, it doesn't. That's wrong. The theory of evolution is a scientific theory, and it can't deal with anything that isn't see, hear, taste, touch, smell. And God is one of those things that it can't deal with. Can you see, hear, taste, touch, smell God? Can you tell me how much He weighs? Or what's the volume? Or how much energy? How many kilojoules? And things like that. And that's not possible because that's not something we can do. And because of that, science can't deal with that. You're not going to find in your any science book chapter where it deals with love or God or ghosts even. Things that we can see, hear, taste, touch, smell. So that's what it's limited to. Now, if you hear a Christian saying that, or someone who believes in God saying that we can prove the existence of God through science, they're wrong. They don't understand the definition for science. See, hear, taste, touch, smell. So you can't use science to prove that existence. If you hear a scientist, on the other hand, saying that, oh, well, science proves that God doesn't exist, again, he's wrong too, because science can't touch that. It's see, hear, taste, touch, smell. So you always have extremes on either side, but in reality, science is a great tool, but it's got its limitations. Just like you wouldn't use a hammer to take a screw out of the wall, you're not going to use science for everything. It's a great tool. I love it. It's wonderful, but it still has its limitations. The last thing on our notes today that we're going to talk about is a straightforward definition for biology, which I believe you guys already know. Biology is the study of life. And my pen's running out of ink. It's the study of life. And in this class, we're going to study from largest. We're going to start with the biosphere, the ecosystem. We're going to talk about ecology. And by the time the school is getting closer to the STAR test, we're going to end with the smallest. We're going to talk about the molecules and living things. So we're going to go from largest to smallest. And typically the smallest, that biochemistry, all those protein synthesis and transcription and translation and DNA, it's all pretty tough. And so right before the STAR test, we're going to work on the toughest stuff right close to the STAR test, so it should be easier for you to remember those things. At this point, what you're going to do is you're going to draw a line across the bottom of your notes, about maybe 5 lines up, and if you can use a straight edge, again, that's best. And this is where your summary will be. So within 24 hours, all the data shows that if you can summarize what we talked about within 24 hours, it helps you to make long-term memories. So wait a couple of hours, then come back to this and summarize in general what we talked about up here. It can only be, it only needs to be 1 to 3 sentences long. It doesn't have to be too long at all.